Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just like to support your non-tie wearing minister. I've gone all my adult life without wearing a tie, and it hasn't impeded my competence and capacity. So I really welcome this bill. It corrects and extends the benefits that are much needed, and it's really much needed. I'm delighted that we are bringing parents' leave and benefit to 5 weeks, and that we are extending the claim period with up to the 2 years. I think that's really progressive, and that you're bringing it into being really quickly is also to be welcomed. I know people are really relying on it for after Easter. I have lots of emails and people are saying, will this be in by Easter? Will this be in by Easter? So they will be delighted with this news. I know that it was inadvertent that same-sex parents of adopted children were omitted previously, and that we are catching up on the outcomes of the marriage referendum. But it was hurtful, and I want to acknowledge that it was hurtful, and so I'm really delighted that we stand in a place of equality today, and that same-sex male parents are getting exactly what they deserve, and that recognition. So the entirety of the bill is sensitively extend leave and transforms us into an equality-based provision that is child-centred. All leave provided in relation to the coming into life of their parents by a child, either by birth or subsequently by adoption, is centred around the care of the child. Its purpose is to bolster and support equality of caregiving by parents of that child. So in this International Women's Day week, it is particularly welcome that we introduce a bill that will ensure an entitlement to leave is shared amongst both parents. Indeed, the provisions of the bill will even allow for up to 4 people to obtain state-aided leave in relation to a child, the parents and their partners, if the parents are now in new relationships within the requisite time frame. So such provisions encourage the re-entry of women into the workplace, set a societal norm about fathers being liable for the care of their children. My husband has never, ever referred to the care of our child as him babysitting. It's probable, though, that he's reasonably unusual in that, because I've heard it all too frequently, that men referring to the care of their own children as babysitting. So the care of the child is an obligation of both parties, both parents, regardless of gender. Just because one gives birth to the child shouldn't nor should it render them under any obligation of sole care. So the bill is about transposing that EU directive of the work-life balance for parents and carers, and it is needed regardless of our EU obligations. But I note that we're going on beyond the requirements as per the set out time frame in the here and now in transposing this because we weren't obliged to transpose it into domestic law until August 2022, and that there was a 2-year extension for its implementation. Now, we still have some work to do on it, and I'm not ignoring that at all, but I do appreciate that we're not time wasting either, and that we're moving quickly on it, and that we are now implementing the requirements well in advance of the obligations. So I look forward to when its provisions are put into their fullest extent. And I mean, I note that in the original directive that it says work-life balance policies should contribute to the achievement of gender equality by promoting the participation of women in the labour market, the equal sharing of caring responsibilities between men and women, and the closing of gender gaps in earnings and pay. Such policies should come to take into account demographic changes, including the effects of the ageing population. Now, I will leave it to my colleague, Senator Curry, to speak about this, because this is by far her area of expertise. But it's good to note that. However, I do have a problem, and I have a couple of things, I'll end on a highlight. But I do have one problem, and that is that the rate of benefit, first of all, I believe inhibits people from taking this up. I think that we're going to have a problem here. So I have reservations about it actually benefiting from the leave, because the rate of parents' benefit is reasonably low, so it's prejudicing the income to a family if they were to avail of it, and there isn't a provision within their workplace. So from that point of view, I think in the long term we need to look towards that. So while this is progressive, I still think we need to consider that. My biggest disappointment falls with regard to the provision for lone parents in this bill, and that being that there is no provision for them. The provisions for parents' leave can be claimed up to by 4 other people, biological parents and their partners, in circumstances where the biological parents are no longer together. So I appreciate that the object was to ensure that the care was shared and not fall to one parent, but the criteria for claiming parents' leave seems to be a pretty low bar if we look at cohabitees or civil partnerships. In fact, the circumstances as to how it is proven that the child is actually being cared for by a person not availing of the leave in circumstances where the parents are no longer living together, I think is questionable. So the threshold for parents' leave is extraordinarily low when more than one person is claiming it. But if you're a lone parent seeking more than your 5 weeks, you're denied it. And so I think it would appear a paternalistic provision that is in place to make sure more than the mother takes leave. And while that's an EU-driven one and not yours, and I absolutely respect that. But if the mother actually needs the leave and the care for the child, she can't avail of it. And in the main, I acknowledge completely that one-parent families can be both male and female headed, but the vast majority of them are women. So with the 2-year extension, we have mothers who need to avail of the additional leave, who are now parenting alone for a multiplicity of reasons. It could be that this includes women who have stood up to domestic violence. We've had bereavement, relationship breakups where the child is being weaponised by the other parent, which is all too frequent an occurrence as well. So in those circumstances, that lone parent is confined to that 5 weeks with necessarily no supports, and yet can't nominate a mother or a cohabitee that they're not in an intimate relationship with to benefit from an extra 5. So I think the criteria is a little unfortunate, and I would implore that we look at it. If we're to liberate mothers, then I think that we need to ensure that we're not inadvertently discriminating against them. So I think it's a lost opportunity. Throughout the pandemic, I've heard from and engaged with individuals and the organisations who represent them, one family being the main one, and they have been extraordinary in trying to advocate for that balance. I want to end, I suppose, I know that my colleague is going to identify this also, but I just want to say there is one chink of light I see in this, and if you can indulge me for a couple of seconds extra. In this, so while I'm criticising the threshold and who else can avail, on the other hand, I stood here last Monday with you and I gave out with regard to surrogacy and all of that, and you were very kind and tolerant of that. But the one chink of light that I do see is that if you're the spouse, cohabitee, or civil partner of the biological father, you will suddenly be able to avail of a leave under this that heretofore for surrogate-born children, they have not been able to avail of it. So I do see a chink of light of a possibility here, which for the first time, the intended mother in these situations will be able to get their 5 weeks leave by virtue of their relationship with the father. And I think that that's a positive thing that I just want to acknowledge and put on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.